Thanks for staying with us. Time now for African News with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, as Nigeria marks the centenary of its unification, dozens more deaths are blamed on Boko Haram insurgents in the northeast. 3 coordinated attacks overshadow ceremonies in Abuja. France's president pledges support in battling insurgents. Also, in Central African Republic, more French troops move in to stem the tide of inter-religious bloodshed. But with unrest breaking out without warning daily, civilians are too frightened to go home. Our correspondents report from a camp set up by peacekeeping forces in the capital, Bangui. And Cape Town really does rock. The South African city is voted as the world's top tourism destination by those in the know. Travel buffs from The Lonely Planet and the New York Times figure the Cape has a lot to shout about. But first, at least 37 more people have been killed by the suspected Boko Haram militants behind 3 coordinated attacks in Nigeria's northeastern Adamawa state. Churches and homes were razed to the ground and civilians executed in raids on the villages of Kachinga, Shua and Machika late on Wednesday. The military is struggling in its offensive against the Islamist sect, and hundreds of people have been killed by Boko Haram so far this year alone. At Thursday's celebrations of the centenary of Nigeria's unification, President Goodluck Jonathan warned that the insurgency was a threat to the whole region.
We must not allow our countries to become safe havens for terrorists. We must cooperate maximally in better managing our political boundaries. We should adopt protocols that allow countries to pursue terrorists well into their safe havens in other nations. While we cannot redefine our borders, we must redefine our collective approach to ending transboundary terrorism and insurgencies.
Well, French President François Hollande was the only Western head of state to attend the celebrations in Abuja today. He's hoping to boost French investment in Nigeria. But with that comes calls for Paris to work more closely with the country and the region in tackling militant religious hardliners like Boko Haram. Well, France 24's Nicolas Chemin is in Abuja. He joins us now. Nicolas, your fight is our fight, said Hollande today. It sounds good, but is Paris really keen to wade into another African security crisis?
Well, what François Hollande said is that what happened in Africa had consequences in Europe, and that therefore he gave his full support to the fight against Boko Haram led by the Nigerian government. We know that France has also been fighting jihadists in Mali, and Nigeria had actually helped the French operation there by sending 1,000 troops. But what we noticed here today is that there were some 15 heads of state, but there wasn't the Cameroonian Paul Biya, and yet Boko Haram operates along this porous border between Nigeria and Cameroon. Right now there are tensions between the two countries, and that's why Paul Biya didn't come. But many here in Nigeria hope that maybe François Hollande in the coming weeks can patch up the relationship between Cameroon and Nigeria so that the fight against Boko Haram can become more efficient. François Hollande, who this Thursday in Abuja also announced that he wanted the French army in Africa to be less static and to be closer to the African armies all over the continent. And he announced that the French army would train 20,000 African soldiers every year.
Now, Nicolas, how far do these security challenges faced by Nigeria weigh on the country's prospect of overtaking South Africa as the continent's #1 economy?
Well, what many experts are saying is that in the coming weeks, the IMF is going to announce that the GDP of Nigeria has surpassed the GDP of South Africa to make it the #1 economic powerhouse in the continent. We know already that Nigeria is the continent's biggest oil producer, and that Nigeria has had a growth rate of 7% these last 8 years. And that's why you had so many French CEOs on this trip with François Hollande, who said that they wanted to invest massively in Nigeria. The most interesting thing about this trip was the fact that former French presidents always went to Francophone countries, and this time François Hollande saying that he's also interested in Anglophone Africa, in Nigeria.
Thanks very much. Nicolas Chemin there for us in Abuja. Well, after Nigeria, François Hollande head to Central African Republic on Friday, where he'll be visiting the French troops fighting alongside African peacekeepers there to stem the tide of bloody inter-religious violence sparked by last year's rebel takeover. Christian militia, who believe Muslim civilians supported the Seleka insurgents, have launched brutal attacks that have driven thousands from the country. Attacks on Wednesday saw at least 11 bodies collected from Bangui's PK5 neighbourhood. Across the city, many Central Africans are still too frightened to go home at night. Well, our Chris Moore sent us this report.
Bangui by night, and with a curfew in force, the main roads are empty. Our French army escort takes us to see a night shelter in the heart of the 5th arrondissement. It's 9 p.m. and families are still trickling in. New arrivals are frisked for weapons. Inside, tents in which people can sleep in safety when they're too frightened to stay at home.
This one was put up yesterday, and it's already full.
The site holds up to 3,000 people, and tonight is brimming.
There was a lot of gunfire in the area last night. So many people ran here for shelter. They only stay here overnight, then they go back to their homes in the morning.
The mayor set up the shelter in conjunction with the French and African forces who guard it. The goal, to bring displaced people back to their own neighbourhoods, with the promise of a safe haven right on their doorstep. The intercommunal violence here is subsiding, but people's houses are far from safe.
There are a lot of gangs who aren't necessarily connected to the anti-Balaka or other groups like that. They're just young delinquents who go out looting. They throw grenades into residential areas in the middle of the night. People run from their homes and then they just go in and take everything.
The nightly looting, a further threat to an already terrorised population.
There's gunfire around the place all night.
They came to our house and went through our possessions. They took almost everything. There's nothing left in the house.
Now, for the moment, this night shelter remains a pilot scheme, but it's one of the options being looked at as the rainy season approaches in terms of clearing out some of Bangui's huge refugee camps.
Well, as the EU works on drumming up contributions to a force of up to 1,000 troops to be sent to Central African Republic, on Thursday, ex-Soviet Caucasus state Georgia pledged to send 150 soldiers. Its defence minister said that it is morally right to do so. In other news, Somalian al-Shabaab extremists have claimed responsibility for a car bombing that killed at least 7 people in Mogadishu on Thursday. The blast happened near Lido Beach and targeted a cafe known to be often used by security officials. The attack comes a week after the militants carried out a major attack against the presidential palace. The group was pushed out from Mogadishu with the help of African Union troops 2 years ago, but continues to carry out fatal guerrilla attacks against government and security targets across the city. France, meanwhile, continues to try and defuse a blossoming diplomatic spat with Morocco. Rabat has moved to stop bilateral judicial cooperation after French police entered the Moroccan embassy in Paris trying to question the domestic intelligence chief over torture allegations. Well, the bust-up has sparked protests in Morocco's capital.
Mohamed Dali's family are royalists and proud of it. So when it comes to standing up for the Moroccan royal family, the pro-monarchy activist is always eager to lead the charge. For Dali, Tuesday's demonstrations were perfectly justified.
It's because of the comments made by France's former ambassador to the United States, which hurt Morocco and the whole Moroccan people.
The comments in question date back to 3 years ago. Human rights activists claim the uproar is really Rabat's reaction to French lawsuits targeting a Moroccan intelligence chief on torture allegations. A French judge has issued a summons for counter-espionage head Abdelatif Hamouchi.
The case is legitimate, not just against Hamouchi, but against all counter-espionage chiefs. As human rights activists, we say that no one should enjoy impunity when it comes to torture, be they the current or former perpetrators.
Analysts argue that neither Paris nor Rabat has anything to gain from the diplomatic row. Experts at Morocco's Strategic Studies Centre point out that France is their country's biggest trade partner and a key political friend in the region.
There is a strategic partnership between the two countries. We saw this during the Malian crisis and with all the threats in the Sahel area. So there is a strategic partnership between the two countries, which have succeeded establishing three-way cooperation between France, Morocco and the rest of Africa.
With France fighting on multiple fronts in Africa, Paris would struggle to do without the diplomatic muscle of its Moroccan ally.
And finally, Cape Town's taken the cake when it comes to the world's top tourism destination. It was named the best spot for a getaway by several international publications, including the New York Times and the UK's Guardian newspaper. As well as boasting breathtaking landscapes, perfect summers and bustling nightlife, its links with the anti-apartheid struggle of Nelson Mandela have also attracted visitors. The late president spent much of his 27 years in jail on the notorious Robben Island. Since his death in December, tourists have flocked in even greater numbers to the prison. Well, that wraps up African news from me, but do stay tuned. A short break and more news and headlines coming up from my colleagues after this break. Take care.